Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. I'm Jill Bloom with Roofing Contractor, and welcome to the Best of Success podcast show. It's always an honor to have a chance to talk to my great friend, Steve Slepcevic, who is the CEO of Strategic Response Partners. Steve, it's great to see you, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on your show. Good to see you.
Well, Steve, I have to say you're such an inspiration to everybody. You are the first that runs to the crisis, no matter what it might be. And recently, you just found yourself in Venezuela after the massive double earthquake, and buildings were collapsing everywhere or had collapsed. And you went in with a team, a search and rescue team, to do whatever it was you needed to do. You just showed up. You show up on your own dime and you make things happen. It's always amazing to see what you're doing, how you're doing it, and really how you are impacting the lives of other people. Let's just start there, Steve. Tell me about Venezuela. How did you end up in Venezuela, and how many people did you take, showed up with you, and what was that all about?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because people say, who called you? Who do you work for? Right. And I always say the phone rings and I answer the call. But the thing about the phone ringing, it's really the spirit, right? The spirit ringing going, hey, Steve, there's a prompting. And you have the skill sets, you have the abilities, you have the knowledge, and you have the team to be effective in this crisis. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what happens. That's the call that I answer. I feel like it's a spiritual thing for me, a contract I signed a long time ago. And it's interesting on how life evolves, because I started out as a general contractor, and in 94 I got shook out of bed in LA because I lived there at the time, and I remember that was a 6.7 January 4th, I believe it was 1994. And I remember telling my wife at the time, as the house was shaking, I was laying in bed, and I've been through many earthquakes, noticing this one was pretty strong. And she's running to one doorway, and I'm like, no, don't go to that doorway, because I built the house. And I go, no, go to the other doorway. I got a 6x8. I got a shear panel, got some MST straps. You want to stand there. And I'm still in bed. And I'm telling her where to stand. And she's like, are you kidding me? And she's panicking. And I'm like, yeah, it's still okay. The walls just have some hairline cracks. I'm still feeling the shaking. I'm trying to notice if it's getting worse or not, and which way my plan is unfolding. But I've always been very calm in the most stressful situations. And I think part of it is I love those environments, because when they're extremely high stress and it demands all my attention, there's a calmness that comes over me. And so as we pushed our visas out, pushed our permits to fly into Venezuela, we just started moving, right? So I live in San Diego. So the flight was from San Diego to Miami with my security team. And then it was interesting, because as I'm calling my team members, I'm like, we're going to Venezuela. And they're like, I just give them a location. And there's people around me going, well, wait a minute. He's in Utah. This guy's in Nevada, right? These guys, the South Florida guys I get, but these other guys are all over the country. You're not asking them or telling them what to do, how to get there. I said, no. I give them an X. They have to be on that X at that time. They'll be there. Well, how do you know if they can get flights or if they're going to be able to train? I said, these guys are special forces. These guys are trained task force guys. These guys know they're the best of the best, And yes, sometimes people call us cowboys or the inglorious bastards or kamikazes. I've heard all of it, right? Because we follow a very simple thing. Be your word, and just at a fault, right? There's no way to deviate from that. When we got there, everything was set. And it was quite interesting, because once we got permissions and we're flying into Venezuela, on our descent, they pull our permits, hold our visas, and this is being told to our pilots as we're getting ready to land. And we get diverted to Santo Domingo, right? Now, what a lot of people didn't know is some of the team members started arguing with the pilots, like, what's going on? All this type of stuff. I reached out to General Flynn, who pushed a call into Marco Rubio to get the permissions we need, like what's going on with this country. And it was quite interesting because as we got diverted, our top task force guy he's also an instructor. His father was on his deathbed in the Santo Domingo. And he had a conversation with his father on his way to Venezuela saying, Dad, I want to come see you. Because he said he knew he was going to be saying his final goodbyes. But I got punched out to get to Venezuela for what I do, as a firefighter, paramedic, and search and rescue task force, FEMA task force captain. I'm being called to show up in this area. What should I do? And his dad and his father goes, son, I'm at peace. Go do what you've been called to do. I'm fine. But as God would have it, our flight got diverted there. And so right from the tarmac, him and one of our other firefighters, who they're very close friends, jumped in a cab, ripped over to see his father, his aunts, uncles. His father lit up when he saw him. They cried, they hugged, they prayed. Then he turned around, came right back to the airport, and then we were wheels up shortly after.
That's amazing.
It's crazy because his father passed away the next day.
Wow.
But his father, when he saw him, he's like, son, in the last 17 years, I've never seen you in uniform. So he was super proud of him, right? But it was cool because, he was all kitted out. He had his radios, sat phones, had all his gears, thermal cameras on him. He had all the chest rig on. He had his uniform on because literally we're mobilizing into Venezuela and we got diverted, right? So it wasn't a situation where he was going to change into street clothes to go see his father. It was just everything was time, And literally when we hit the ground, we had two armored SUVs. Thanks to Byron Rogers, who runs our security team, Saber Defense team, had been there 3 months before with one of the pastors. That's an internationally well-known pastor. So in La Guaira, the mayor was the one that we connected with immediately. And he's like, what do you need? I said, I need a heavy lift crane. I need two, hoists, and I need two cranes. I need some excavators. And because we surveyed a bunch of buildings, and then we started to work on about 9 different buildings that had the greatest probability for life, not the ones that had pancaked, but the ones that had fallen over, which would create for more void spots. And one in particular had a supermarket that was down below that would give us water and food,
Okay.
But having been delayed for 3 days with permit, the government holding us back from getting into the country. And we weren't the only ones. They held back the Ecuadorian team. They held back the Spanish team, who then got turned around, went back to Spain, then finally came back in. So the amount of fact that they stopped and held back all these search and rescue teams cost a lot of lives, because the first couple of days, every hour is critical on life saving, and so in the early part of it, we had some medical rescues, which are part with our partners out there. And there's 27 or 23 to 27. I don't remember what the exact count of different search and rescue teams that were out there. But even if you had every search and rescue team in the entire country out there, there was not enough. If you had all the structural engineers in the world, there was just not enough. 1,500 buildings collapsed, total collapse. There was thousands that are partially collapsed, and there's thousands that are that should be red tagged.
Yeah.
And so we had our ICU nurse with us. There was a team of doctors on the ground. We went in right away with Samaritan's Purse, walked with their medical director, so that when we took people from these buildings, we could get them in the ambulance right away and rush to the closest medical field hospital, which was Samaritan's Purse. That's why, as you know, in the past thing, that we're all connected, right? Sure. We count on a silo, our own system, our own team, and not count on external, hospital. That the other one was in Caracas, which is hour and a half, depending on traffic. So when people are in a critical situation like that, every minute right there is on the recovery, like saving these people's lives. But as the progress went on, it became very difficult because, again, we were using the sonars, DELSARs, systems that actually can test whether the person's breathing, the heartbeat, right, of these sensing and listening devices, right? But the difficult thing many times is getting them to get silent on these mounds, because you're in these piles with the family members. This isn't like the United States where they would quarantine it.
Sure. Yeah, you're saying that.
yeah, if you look at Surfside, the collapse in Surfside, that took just about all the task force in Florida that worked on that pile, one building, for 30 days to deconstruct that whole building.
Yeah,
And
Steve, the emotional side of this was just I watched you, I watched some of the interviews that you had done, and it was amazing to watch what you guys accomplished with saving lives and everything, just with helping the people. But I guess what I really want to try to drill into and really have you share some insight with the contractors that are listening. And we've talked about this before, but it's so worth spending some more time talking about it. Is you never know when there's going to be a crisis. You never know here in the United States when there's going to be an emergency, whether there's a tornado, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's some sort of like massive storm, which they seem to be happening more and more. But what are even, and I'm sure there's some great things that you learned even being in Venezuela, but what are some of the top things that all contractors should be doing to help prepare? And what I mean by that is, I think one of the things we've touched on in the past is you've talked about how contractors need to make sure that their people have their families, all their families are in order, right? So when something is extreme like this happens, they have they have something put together so that their families are safe, that then they can come and they can also be the first responders, because you never know when you need to be a first responder.
yeah, I mean, having a great family plan starts with actually creating a plan and sitting down with your family and doing a plan as to where you're going to meet if a situation unfolds, right? You always have to plan, even when you're going on vacation, what is your escape route if you have to leave an area? What are alternate routes that are not the main highway where there'll be choke points, right? If you're leaving a neighborhood, what if that entire area dumps onto one main artery? What is the traffic going to be like? Are you going to get stuck in a situation? And people look at their area and think, well, I'm only going to think about my area. But when they're traveling to Puerto Vallarta, did the American tourists think that they were going to all of a sudden be caught up in the middle of a cartel war, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
and then we got panic phone calls from VIPs we have in Puerto Vallarta, which we sent armored vehicles to pick them up. And then we got them on a Cuernavaca on a private flight through our airline, a pilot network into Tijuana, so they can cross into San Diego and then take their flights wherever they were going in the United States. But those that didn't know got caught up in some really bad situations, wildfires. People like, oh yeah, well, I'm not in a wildfire zone, but those people that were in Lahaina during that time had no idea that a fire was going to burn and send them into the ocean. And there was a ton of fatalities there. And then families got displaced. One family ended up in one shelter. The other part of the family ended up in another shelter. And for 5 days, they thought the other family members were dead because there was no communication in the area.
Right.
Right? Again, communication. Hurricane Helene. The first rescue we did with our private helicopters when we did Hurricane Helene was because somebody had a satellite phone. They called and gave us the coordinates, what their medical needs were, and we landed a helicopter at a volunteer fire department on an LZ to handle that medical emergency. Right?
Yeah.
People were cut off for days. One person ended up killing another person over food because they had no communication with the outside world. They didn't know what was going on. There's no TV, no cell service, no communication. It's one of the things I stress upon very close. Have a plan and then either get a satellite phone or get a Starlink. I mean, everywhere I go in the back of my vehicle is a mobile Starlink. And I have 4 of them. People are like, well, that's kind of crazy. Well, I'm in the response business. I don't expect people to have one for every family member. But if you're going to get a phone, get a satellite phone. Iridium satellite phone's good. An Inmarsat's not good. I don't like them. There's not enough satellites out there. Great place to get them is go to sat123.com. They have a good plan, probably the best. They serve a lot of military contractors. They serve a lot of first responders, and they serve the civilian market.
Yeah.
But life safety, right? You have people that fall off roofs. You have a person that may have a heart attack on your job site. And again, as contractors, people go, well, you're not a paramedic. No, right? I do own and run a massive team of firefighters for private fire that we do for the high net worth clientele and a couple of insurance companies. It's natural. I live in Southern California. My family's all in Malibu, Agora Hills. We grew up with fires our whole life. So it just becomes a natural thing in our backyard to handle. But at the end of the day, I'm no different than most contractors. As a former general contractor, sitting on a massive, earthquake, 9 different buildings that we're running. That I was running as a superintendent, as a project manager. It felt like my old days, right? I had a search and rescue helmet on, but it might as well be a hard hat because I'm navigating a crane, the hoist, right? The excavators. I'm managing a project site, and my crew was every person that showed up on the job. Some were there from the day one, digging their family members out with a spoon, literally a spoon in their bare hands. So here I am assigning gloves, hard hats, I'm breaking down shifts of how people are going to operate in shifts so they don't get hurt, right? Teaching them rope rescue, confined space, how to move. Why? Because I took that training myself, not knowing that someday I was going to be called to do this type of situation. People are like, what are you doing a rope rescue, confined space, urban search and rescue training in Florida, in Coral Gables? I'm like, because who knows? I may just need it someday, right? Or and it's presented itself so that I've also aligned myself with knowing people. And I think one of the biggest things, most important things, is get to know your neighbors. Be a relationship person, right? Connect with everybody. You don't know when you may need that person, or that person may be of service to you, or vice versa. You may be of service to that person, right? I always work on my skill sets, and I take every additional training. We run a grid down course that I train people how to live off the grid, process a live animal, start a fire, forage for food, security, type stuff, build shelters. And why do I do it? It's not fun. It's uncomfortable. But because that makes me more valuable as a person, that if I'm in a scenario, I could be of service to somebody. And for me, I live a life that I don't ever live a life of regret, thinking that if there was a scenario I couldn't protect my wife and my kids, right? Or I couldn't get myself out of a situation, and be that person, with my skinny jeans, my triple filtered lattes, and I'm bitching about the traffic. I'm not that person. That's a useless man, right? And for me, I want to be an instrument of value, right? Be my contribution to society, right? I want to be that good man, that faithful husband, you know what I mean? That dedicated servant, that when shit goes to shit, I got a guy, and I have the tools, and I have the skills and abilities and knowledge to be effective. And as company owners, it's so important that you do those safety trainings, right? That you bring in a medic and teach a class on it, right? Do those types of things that improve the value of your team. That's going to improve their home life. That's going to improve their confidence, right? Can teach them about conditioning, right? How are they working out? How are they eating? What are they putting into their bodies? What are they listening to, right? How are they being a contribution in the society? You want to build a strong team, a strong company, man, it starts with you. And I'm
100%.
so many leaders fail in that aspect of it. They get lazy, they get complacent, they get fat, right? And then you look at it, you're like, man, you can do better than that.
Sure.
We can all do better than that.
Well, this will be a great list for all contractors to add to their safety training. And I think most of the people that subscribe to us have either daily or weekly safety trainings. So sounds like they need to bring in a medic to make sure that they can, first, of course, come make sure everybody has a plan for everybody in their company. And how do you hold them accountable to that, Steve? If you have a safety meeting, and do you have them come back to be like, here's my written plan? Like, how do you make sure?
Yeah, not only a written plan, I'll test them on it, and then I'll have them actually, because they're all over the country, they have to show the deployment gear, and it has to be videotaped. Like they have to videotape all their gear laid out on their Pelican case. So they have different deployment gear, stuff that's hurricane related, that we need in hurricane deployment, stuff that has to do with wildfires, right? Their brush bag, the respirators, their gear, the type of gloves that are for fires versus the guys out on the search and rescue team have extrication gloves. They're different. They have a different set of gear, right? So there's things that the company supplies, and then there's things that they're responsible for. So, and I do a quarterly meeting on those deployment stuff of here's where we're at in season, here's where we're at. And then I do those separate trainings, right? By getting the team out of their comfort zone. I've done active shooter trainings with my team, and I incorporate both the security team and the medics, right? So sometimes these guys are getting cross-trained. The security guy's like, I don't want to learn anything about wildland fire and structure protection. I'm like, yeah, you're learning it. If you're going to be on the security team, because we may put you on a detail for a client in Malibu, and you're thinking, well, I'm there as a security guy. No, you may now be required to grab the hose line, turn the fire pump on, draft from the pool, and do structure protection along credentialed firefighters. You're just going to be another team member. You're not leaving because there's no law enforcement. The homes are wide open. These are high net worths. These are celebrities and very well-known CEOs of different companies. They're not going to leave their stuff vulnerable, right? And you're not leaving the X. You're staying up there. If you leave, you can't get back in because they're not credentialed. So they have to stay on the spot. So we cross-train them. And so now they're like, oh, now I'm more.
I get it.
And they're like, oh, that was exciting. That was fun. That was easy. Versus, oh, it's difficult, it's hard, and that motion goes in that other direction. Yeah.
Sure. Well, Steve, I think we could probably talk for another hour as to what people need to do to prepare and all the things that you do with your team to make them prepared. But these are some great takeaways right now. And I think that everybody listening just should be empowered to add some things to their safety trainings, because it's critical to make sure that everyone's prepared.
Yep, and have a go bag in your car. Start with the simple things. I think people sometimes they overthink it and then they go too far, right? But if you do it in small increments, it becomes easy, and then eventually you go, wow, I have a really resilient plan. I've got some training under my belt. I've trained a great team. My house is prepared. My home is in order, first spiritually, mentally, physically. And there you go. Now you're a good contribution to society and to humanity,
100%. Well, I know that you, again, you do so much when it comes to these crisis situations. If anybody wanted to donate or they wanted to help, where do they go? How do they find out more?
Well, they can find out a lot more about the company on srp24.com, or you can see some of our deployment stuff on YouTube if you type in Strategic Response Partners. We also, aside from this big medical shipment we have going to Venezuela right now, we also have a lot of 4-person tents, because there's over 20,000 people that are displaced right now that are living on the streets, rat infestation, mosquitoes. It rains, it's pouring through their mats. I mean, it's just a really horrific type scenario. So we're really pushing hard on the humanitarian side of it now. But they can go to givesendgo.com/Venezuela.
Okay.
They can see our recent interview with Dell and Byron and my team on there. And then we have an updated video that we're going to be sharing as well with just all the humanitarian aid that's going on, medical supplies and stuff that's going out there right now. So, and we have a wildfire season, we have a hurricane season, we have earthquake predictions, and we have the threat of war, right? Nothing's for sure, right? So always, like I always say, always be ready for whatever may come.
Well, there's no doubt, Steve, you are the poster child for being ready and being ready to go and serve and give back. And thank you so much for all you do. And thank you so much for all the tips for all the contractors listening and things that they can do to help prepare even better. So again, if anybody has any questions for you, Steve, it's srp24.com. And if anybody has any questions for us, it's either roofingcontractor.com or wconline.com. And while you're there, make sure you follow us on all our social media. Please stay safe and healthy, and we can't wait to talk to you soon. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you for having me on your show.